Hi, how do I submit a question to the podcast? I've sent 3 of my dogs to David over the years, but now my brother is having trouble with his dog. She's calm in the crate when they're home, but when they leave, she barks and barks to the point where she's so worked up she's covered in slobber. Next, she is obsessed with water. They've tried desensitizing her. They've gone to the vet. No internal issues. She pees every time she gets excited, even if she's had very little water. Anytime she comes over, anytime she sees another dog. Any way we could submit those questions to the podcast. So this is a lot of different things, and we kind of have a tiered approach to working through this kind of stuff, right? So we can look at the symptoms that we're having, right, of the barking and barking in the crate, right? Or sorry, that we have the getting themselves so worked up into the crate where they're covered in slobber and stuff. We have the obsession with the water. We have the peeing, whether it's excitable, whether it's submissive every time people come over, anytime she sees another dog, right? But all of these things, per how I'm reading this question, are coming from a dog that gets themselves like 0 to 700 amped up like in half a second, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these types of dogs that struggle this intensely with impulse control issues, they get so worked up, they lose control of everything. They lose control of themselves in the crate, and typically they'll just be barking, freaking out, just out of their head, not even focusing, paying attention, slobbering everywhere, pawing at the crate, barking, et cetera, et cetera. They'll just lose control of their bladder anytime they get overstimulated. And a lot of times what I do is I don't look at necessarily the symptoms of what the dog is doing. I look at the general impulse control as a whole, right?
Okay.
And it sounds like it sounds like it's easier than it is, obviously. It's simply a matter of starting to get this dog trained and more under control. Mm-hmm. And we start with an initial program of working the dog through all their foundational commands, all of their communication, stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And then we start chipping away at some of these areas of impulse control just in general, right? So before I'm even worried about the crate, I'm going to start working a lot of duration exercises. Can I get this dog to hold really, really long down stays and really, really long bed stays for extended periods of time while I'm moving in and out of the house, going out of sight, coming back in, stuff like that, and just getting them working that muscle of keeping themselves under control. That's going to start to stimulate 50% of their brain onto a task. That's going to start to stimulate 50% of their brain to be focused in and compliant, which will only leave a remaining 50% to get themselves so overstimulated by things, right? From there, we start looking at some of the specific things they would do in the crate, right? So I would start immediately correcting for the barking, right? Before we even worry about the state of mind of the dog when they're in the crate and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to make sure that first and foremost, they could start being quiet in there and understanding that in the crate, there are some boundaries they need to abide by. A lot of people, when I talk about this, they get really concerned that, correcting the dog in the crate is going to make them it's going to make them have a bad association with being in the crate and this and that. I always tell them the dog already clearly has a horrible association with the crate, right? So nothing you're going to do is going to make that worse. If anything, you're just going to teach the dog to focus in and not get themselves into this uncontrollable state of being overstimulated and aroused in the crate, right?
Yeah.
Interrupting that state of mind. And every time they start going from, okay, I'm in it, I'm calmed, I'm starting to get myself worked up to bark, to, oh.
Yeah.
Right? Snap them out of it. Oh,
Yep.
What the heck? And then they start trying to cycle again. And then, once they hit a certain point, snaps them out of it, right? And then after you repeatedly do that a couple of times, they start being like, wait a minute. What's going on here? Something's different. Usually I get myself into this out of mind state of mind right now. And now I'm not able to do that because every time I start trying to cycle into this, I get snapped out of it and I focus back in, right? And, if you're not present for this, sometimes this is where I would implement something like a bark collar. And this initially will not take away the anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. This just gets things to a place where they're more manageable. This gets things to a place where the dog becomes more conscious of what it is that they're actually doing, right? They're able to look at the situation they're in and they're able to find alternative ways to essentially self-soothe and to essentially get themselves calming down, right? So, or better coping mechanisms, right? So as you start to interrupt that state of mind, which you'll see is the dog will start then trying other things. Maybe they'll still pant. Maybe the first 4 times after you've stopped the barking, they still sit in the crate and they just pant the entire time. Okay, well, we made some progress, right? We stopped the barking. They're still really anxious in the crate, and they're still all slobbery and gross and stuff, but we've brought it from here down to here, right? Then, after a couple of times of doing that, maybe we start seeing they only pant for the first half of you being gone, right? Then we start seeing them only pant for the first 10 minutes. Then we start seeing prolonged periods of time where they go and they lay down, even for just a split second, and then they get back up, right? Then we see them hit a point where they start taking naps in it. And because they're more physically aware and emotionally aware of what it is that they're doing, they're able to try alternatives, right? Now, going in and trying to address these crate issues without addressing all of the other areas of impulse control is just kind of counterintuitive, right? It's not that it won't work at all. I mean, you can get a little bit of progress doing that. But if you're going from these contrasting, like super freaking crazy and out of control all the time, and then in the crate, like there's all these rules and structure, that is going to create a little bit of this association of like the polar opposites, right? Out of the crate is so much fun where I could do whatever the hell I want to do. In the crate is like not fun because there's rules and boundaries, right?
Exactly.
So you have to address the overall state of mind of this kind of stuff, which is where, again, that impulse control kind of comes into play with this. And that gets into the other side of this, right? So first off, the obsessed with water thing. Now, I don't know if this is obsessed with water from the standpoint of the dog just like guzzles water like crazy every time they're presented with it. If that's the case, it's probably a twofold thing. One, anytime you're dealing with dogs that have this much crate anxiety, like because they're panting so much in the crate and slobbering so much in the crate, they typically come out of the crate extremely dehydrated, right? So you'll see them just absolutely gorge themselves with like an entire pail of water as soon as you let them out. Until you start seeing the progress of the crate, that's going to be normal. That's going to be something that you're going to see, and I wouldn't worry about it, but I also wouldn't start restricting the dog of it either, right? I would let them guzzle up as much of it as they want to and just let them realize it's not going to go away. You're not going to drink all of it, because the second you start restricting that water access, the second you start creating more drive for the water, right? Which obviously we don't want to do.
Yeah.
Hear the popo coming? That's pretty loud. They're at my front door. They're coming for me. So that's what I'm assuming is going on with the obsessed with water thing. And then because she's having these peeing issues, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that she's probably, her brother is also probably restricting water to try to avoid some of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand, like, that's the logical thing of like, well, she's peeing every time people come over, so I'm just going to stop giving her water before people come over. But again, it's just going to make the problem worse. That's not the solution for it. It's simply going to make the dog more driven for water and to gorge it down more every time they're presented with it, right? Which you don't want to do, obviously. So then you get into the excitable peeing when people come over, or when she sees another dog. Again, those are impulse control issues, right? The first thing I do when I have dogs that get like excitable peeing when people come over is we work on that bed command, and we make sure that for the first 15 to 20 minutes that people over the house, the dog gets all that excitement and all that stimulation out of the way on the bed. They're not going to pee. Because most of it is triggered to, they run up to you, they get all excited, and if you acknowledge or pet the dog, that's when the peeing starts. Right? On the bed, they can get all that out of their system so that when they get off of the bed, energy level is 10x decreased. You don't have as much of that arousal. You don't have as much of that pee. Same with the seeing the other dog. I mean, it's a very similar situation. You know, it's just one of those things where you got to work on the impulse control. You got to make sure the dog is not getting themselves this worked up when they see another dog. So sometimes I get questions like this, and I feel bad because like I want to give a more in-depth answer of like, this is something you can go do tomorrow kind of thing. Right? But most of this kind of stuff is there's too many layers to it to give an answer like that. This is not something like my dog just jumps on people. Like, yeah, something like that, we could give you 4 different ways to start correcting the dog when they jump on people, which will kind of help solve that problem. But when you're dealing with grayer issues like overstimulation and stuff, the solution is just training, right? And I guess it is a simple thing that you can go out and do tomorrow. But at the same time, it's like, you know, like that's more time that takes money, that takes resources, that takes time.
It's not an overnight solution.
Not an overnight kind of solution for those types of things. Right? But unfortunately, that still is kind of the solution with these kinds of things. So that's something you could do right off the rip. I mean, listen, as far as things at home you could start doing, again, purchasing an e-collar, purchasing a prong collar. You could start with some of my YouTube videos on introducing the prong collar on the walk to try to help with some of these dog issues. From there, you could either work all the way through like the introducing the e-collar with the walk and stuff. We got 2 videos on that, obviously, with Major that we did. There's also a video where we used a pet corrector to correct for dog reactivity out on the walk. We actually have like 3 different pet corrector videos showing how to use that, which could help with that overstimulation, right?
Yep.
So you could start doing those things, obviously, without hiring a trainer.
Yes.
You could purchase, again, either an e-collar or a bark collar to start using in the crate with the dog. Because the first step is you have to block that pattern of the barking in the crate. And then you could stop restricting access to water, obviously.
Yep.
And I think we might have a couple videos on teaching the bed command and stuff. All of these rules are going to kind of start to apply with that. You can also look at, too, like when you have people come over, before you have that bed command, taught, is the dog jumping on people, right? Because that would be something that you could start correcting right away as well to help reduce the arousal levels a little bit. But you probably still will need a good bed command ultimately taught. So a lot of layers to this. Those are a couple places I would start with the walk and with the crate. I would pick those 2 things to like isolate and get under control right away.
Yeah.
And again, we got YouTube videos on how to do those things, so that can kind of give you a little bit of a hand with that stuff.